How's it going, everyone? As always, God bless you and thank you for being here. I'm Gage and this is Candy Coral Aquatics. If you're new here, please hit the subscription button and tap that notification bell because you just found the only place you ever need to be to have all your reefing questions answered. If you're not new and you're back for more, I just want to say thank you very much for the support, for being here and taking time out of your day to watch my videos. If you guys think I'm doing a good job and you like the information here, please go ahead and drop me a comment down below and hit the like button. It would really help me out and I would appreciate it. Today's topic of discussion is going to be on rock flower anemones. We're going to discuss care requirements, water parameters, lighting parameters, and why I really think this is probably the #1 addition to anybody's reef tank, even new hobbyists. So we're going to kind of digress for a second, and we're going to talk about bubble-tipped anemones for just a minute. If I had to give you a list of popularity as far as anemones in the hobby, I would probably have to say the #1 would be bubble-tipped anemones. Now, this is for a very specific reason. It has nothing to do with the coloration or the price tag of them, but it has everything to do with the fact that they're very readily accepted by clownfish. So a lot of people buy them specifically to host clownfish. Now, a rock flower anemone will not host clownfish, but it will host other things, such as sexy shrimp, other anemone-dwelling shrimps, crabs, and things of that nature. So just because a clownfish won't host it, just hold on and don't give up, because there's a lot of other really cool little critters that will host them just fine. Now, the other reason why I say bubble tips are probably #1 is because any shop that you go to, they're more than likely going to have bubble tips before they have rock flowers. But again, that just stems back to that whole people want them for their clownfish and really nothing else. So let's start talking about the rock flower. Why do I think the rock flower anemone is a #1 pick for anybody, especially new hobbyists? Well, this is going to be a multitude of reasons. Reasons #1 being the coloration that they offer. There is endless amounts of color, texture, and pattern that these guys can provide to your tank. So you're never going to get bored of them, and there's probably always going to be one out there that you don't yet have. Reason #2 is going to be the price tag. The price tag on these guys is extremely affordable, especially when you look at the different textures and pattern and options that these guys bring to a tank, as well as how forgiving they are for their water chemistry. Which brings us to point #3, which is water parameters. They're extremely forgiving when it comes to lighting and water parameters as well, making them the absolute ideal choice for new hobbyists. I'm going to take you guys on a little tour of my tank, and I'm going to show you the different types of rock flowers that I have in my tank. Stop #1 is going to be all the way in the back at the highest point in the tank. We can see a bright neon teal rock flower anemone. Now, this guy's got brilliant color. It's even better in person. And the tentacles on it are extremely unique. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to zoom in for a second. And I'm going to show you guys what the tentacles look like. So at first glance, you can notice that they're frilly. They're jaggedy, serrated-y. That's just a multitude of different things going on here. And I know it sounds strange, but if I zoom in a little bit more, you're going to go, oh yeah, I see what you're saying. Look at the texture on those things. It's incredible. Absolutely incredible. Now, that teal neon center in about 6 or 7 different places on the tentacles going around the anemone, it kind of bleeds off, which you can see, which gives excellent contrast to the purple tentacles underneath. Now, I currently have 3 of these anemones in my tank. I started off with 2, and then another one formed, which I will tell you how that happens as well. Zooming back out, let's go down to the bottom of the tank, and let's take a look at the other types that I have in this system. This one here is a kind of reddish orange. It's really more red in person, but the camera makes it look orange. Skirt, and the tentacles on this are more of what you would probably expect to see. You know, if you had to think of a rock flower anemone or just an anemone in general, these are more normal looking tentacles, okay? The center of it is blue with red, and then if we scooch over here to the right, this little guy always reminds me of Hawaii. I've never been to Hawaii, but it kind of just looks like a flower you'd see there. It's got a burnt orange center with yellow around it, and then the tentacles on this look like fluffy cotton, which is colored nicely in white and gray. If we scooch back to the back here, we're going to see this guy trying to hide. He's more of a creamsicle orange, and the tentacles on him are grayish white. And if I had to give you an idea of the texture of them, it would be a combination of those tentacles and that put together, okay? So as you can see, just with the few specimens that I have in my tank, there's already a vast difference between them as far as coloration, texture, tentacles, patterning, etc., etc. So they just add a lot of diversity to a tank. Now, when we're talking about why are they perfect for new hobbyists, water chemistry is something that you're going to be playing with a lot when you're first learning this hobby, okay? It's going to be the number one thing that kills things and causes you to pull your hair out. But you don't have to worry about it as much when you have these guys in your tank. So let's say they're the first addition to your tank. There's nothing else going on. They're very forgiving to swings in water parameters. So when you're learning how to do things and, you know, your nitrates might be too high or phosphate might be too high, blah, 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 they're not going to mind. They're still going to do just fine. If I had to give you numbers to shoot for, I would say the absolute best for a mixed reef tank and pretty much all coral would be a nitrate level of 8 to 10, a phosphate level of 0.03, no ammonia, no nitrite. But you know, guys, really, if you are struggling because you're new and your phosphates are in the 30s, your nitrate is in the 30s, your phosphate is high, it's, you know, correct it, but you don't have to freak out because your rock flower anemones are still going to look great, they're still going to grow, and they're still going to be fine. So they're very forgiving of dirtier tanks. Lighting options. This is another reason why they're absolutely perfect for beginners. When you go out and you start spending the time and the money on this hobby, you start to realize how quickly it adds up. So if you can't afford a top of the line light, go out and buy a cheap one and get yourself some rock flower anemones. They're going to look great and they're still going to love the light. And here's how I know that, and here's my proof. Number one, if we look at the rock flowers in my tank, the one in the far back, the teal neon green one, you can see that it's at the highest point of the tank. It receives more light than any other coral in my tank. Whereas the ones in the sand bed, they're at the lowest portion of the tank and they would theoretically receive less light than everything else in my tank. And as you've seen, they're all looking great and they're all doing just fine. Which leads me to believe that they can stand a multitude of different, lighting parameters. So if you don't have the strongest light in the world, don't worry about it. They're still going to be just fine. Now, price tag. Some of them can be pretty expensive. The neon teal ones in the back, those fluorescent teal ones in the back, I first purchased them, there was only 2 on the rock, and I paid $100 for them, so $50 a piece. The other ones in the tank, some of them are considered ultras, so I paid anywhere between 50. I don't really want to say it was more than $50 a piece for them, which I think is honestly really fair, especially when we're looking at all the positives of them. Okay, the coloration, the texture variants, the fact that they're forgiving of water parameters and lighting. It's a very good investment because it's something that is going to be in your tank for a long time and bring you a lot of color and happiness to your reef system. Now, pricing is always going to vary depending on where you shop and where you go, but when we look at other anemones, for instance, bubble-tipped anemones, bubble tips usually carry a price tag of anywhere between $80 to $100, even a lot. I've even seen some for $200-$300. Now, to me, that's kind of crazy because there's not a ton of different colors that a bubble tip comes in. I mean, there is quite a few, but it's nowhere near the diversity of rock flowers. The other issue that I have with the bubble tipped anemones is, they move around a lot, and I don't know, they're not as forgiving for water chemistry. So if you're new in the hobby or you don't have an old system or your water parameters aren't great, they're really just not the anemone for you. Whereas the rock flowers will still host all sorts of little critters and give you a really good array of colors, textures, and patterns. I hope this video has been informative. I hope that it's shed some light on maybe some questions that you've had, and I hope it has encouraged you to go out and get some rock flower anemones for your tank. Oh, I almost forgot. Before I go, let's talk about propagation. So with a bubble-tipped anemone, you can usually cut it in half or wait till it splits and then you will have two. The most common form of propagation for a bubble-tipped anemone is to cut it down the middle and allow it to heal, thus giving you two anemones instead of one. You cannot propagate rock flower anemones to the best of my knowledge, so don't go out and start cutting on your prized rock flower anemone. They actually reproduce sexually, okay? So as time progresses and as you get more adult anemones than juveniles in your tank, they will start to reproduce sexually on their own. Feeding, they will make the food from the light, but I do highly encourage that you feed them. As I have said in my other videos, it's only beneficial for coloration and growth. And when you start to see little baby rock flower anemones popping up, you really should feed those guys because it's going to give them a lot better chance at survival. Anyways, guys, I've kind of rambled on longer than I wanted to. It turned into an about 11-minute video when I really only wanted this to be about 7 minutes long. So thanks again for being here. Please subscribe if you haven't. And if you have any questions or comments, you guys know where to put them. Take care and God bless, and we'll see you next time.